You don't own me.
Booking a room with 2 beds at a hotel isn't exactly your idea of a romantic getaway. Orbitz gets it. Visit orbitz.com/pride to find hotels that welcome you to travel as you are. Orbitz, travel as you are.
So just let me be myself to say and do whatever I
please. On this episode of China Unscripted, the Belt and Road Initiative is spreading around the world, but it's a new type of communist colonialism, and it could put us all in debt to China. Welcome to China Unscripted. I'm Chris Chappell.
I'm Shelley Zhang.
And I'm Matt Ganeshta.
And joining us today is Dr. Rachel Winston, author of, many books, the latest being Diplomacy with Chinese Characteristics and Belts and Roads Under Beijing Thumbs. Singular thumb. I think Beijing only has one thumb.
But it's an iron thumb.
Yeah. When will we get behind the iron thumb?
Yeah.
So now that we've established how smart we are, Dr. Rachel Winston, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, so I know your background originally was sort of more in education. How did you get interested in China?
I started traveling to schools in China and speaking at schools. And then I did an MBA program where I went to school partly in China. And then I went to Harvard and started studying China's economy. And that kind of, the ball started rolling. And I found it so fascinating that the China that I knew when I was a child was not the China that was coming up today. It was a very different China.
Well, so what do you mean? What was the difference that you saw?
When my father was with the United Nations, and he was the director of one of the branches of the United Nations, and so I grew up around international politics. And I mean, you didn't go to China, you didn't visit China, you didn't fly to China. It was a place that was off limits. You really didn't know what was going on there, but whatever it was, the people were really poor, and the cities were not developed, and it wasn't a place where we even considered going, and we traveled all over the world. So then when I was teaching college and I retired, then I said, I need to know more about this country that is growing so fast that we all should be aware of what's happening. And I needed to be more aware because I didn't know enough.
Well, yeah, I think what's interesting is you've already had like a very rich career. You started college when you were 13. You have multiple degrees in many fields. You've taught many fields. And then after all of this, you decided, let's look at China. And I imagined it sounds like at the beginning you sort of kind of had sort of the more rosy view of, what China is today, because obviously you went from a country that, you couldn't travel to infrastructure, high-speed rails. So what was that change of thought like? So
when I went to Shanghai, I was like, wow, these buildings are beautiful. And then I went to Guiyang, and I went to Hingguashu Falls, and I went to Xi'an. I went all over China, and everywhere I went, it was big, beautiful, developed, and art. And you go to Los Angeles, because I live near Los Angeles. I mean, it doesn't look like parts of China.
It's a hellscape.
I was like, I would rather live there in China than here. In fact, we have our favorite hotel. I didn't tell you this, but I live in a hotel 24/7. I don't have a house or an apartment, and I haven't had one for a very long time. So I live in a hotel. So we have our favorite hotels in China in every city. And I don't think I can go back and live in any of them anymore. But I don't think I'd risk my life. But I found China remarkably different than the China that I had expected. Except on the outside, it looks so beautiful, but on the inside, it's very dangerous. So I was really fascinated by how a country could turn around like that.
When did you start realizing that it was dangerous?
I think it's when I started working with businesses in China. Some of the people that I worked with talked about cooperation. Their favorite word is, we're going to cooperate.
Sounds nice.
Yeah, it sounded great. Win-win. They would say win-win. It's going to be great for both of us. But actually, it never happened that way. Some of the people took my picture, my bio, everything, put it on their website and said that I worked with them, but I never worked with them. And after a number of experiences like that, that didn't stop me. One of the people that I met with at a hotel in Shanghai was a CCP military officer. It was a woman. She was one of the scariest people I've ever seen in my life. I was talking to her daughter, but she stood right over top of us in her military outfit. And I was like, am I going to get out of this hotel alive? I mean, I was really afraid for my life, and I needed to know more. But when really, it was Xinjiang that did it for me. It was, how do we have concentration camps today? I don't understand that. I went to Dachau in 1972. It said never again. And how is never again mean that we have not just one, but we have hundreds of concentration camps? And it was really the concentration camps that got me trying to understand more about China's policies and why they would do this.
Well, why did you want to focus on the Belt and Road? Because I feel like that's something that a lot of people don't really know much about.
So my thesis at Harvard and the University of Chicago were both surrounded about the South China Sea, because what was happening in the South China Sea was unconscionable. And I didn't understand why the United States didn't protect Scarborough Shoal. Like, I didn't understand that.
Yeah.
I read the Mutual Defense Treaty, and I didn't understand that.
Just to give some quick background for the audience, because that's an important event. Scarborough Shoal was claimed by the Philippines and China. Chinese essentially sent their Coast Guard in to occupy the shoal. Philippines and China looked like they were really going to go to blows over that. The U.S. stepped in and said, just both sides leave. The Philippine side left, the Chinese side stayed and occupies it till this day. And the Philippines has a mutual defense treaty with the United States, and the fact that the U.S. just kind of let this happen, it had shockwaves in Southeast Asia for a long time. So continue, please.
So, once I started reading about Scarborough Shoal, then I realized that China had taken other islands long before that. And they were threatening others. And I think I was attracted by, words like, wolf warrior, salami slicing, these kinds of things that were like, wow, what are they doing? So my first book was Raging Waters in the South China Sea. The problem was, when I got there, I was like, what is happening in India? Like, is China going to India or Bhutan or like Nepal? Like, why are they doing this, taking all these other countries? So then I got into China's power grab and expanding claims. That was my second book. So I was really just in Asia, but Africa kept on, pulling me. Like, what is China doing in Africa? And so I wrote Belt and Road under Beijing's thumb, but the book was just so long. It was so long. It was like 550 pages, and I almost 600 pages. And I just split the book in two. I was like, something? We can't, people are not going to read like that long of a book. So I split into, and I made it into Diplomacy with Chinese Characteristics and Belt and Road under Beijing's thumb. So really, those two were written at the same time. They were one book until I cleaved them apart. Like
Kill Bill Part 1 and 2.
Yeah. Or, Wolf Warrior Wolf Warrior 1 and 2, right?
Has China made that movie?
Yeah.
There's
But
multiple
That's-
Wolf
But
Warriors.
specifically called Wolf. Oh yeah, it is called Wolf
Isn't that the
Warrior.
whole
That's where it
thing?
came
yeah,
from.
The
Yeah.
whole thing came from Wolf Warrior.
Oh,
You
yeah.
forgot.
Yeah, I forgot. It's just so in the lexicon now.
You should watch it. I watched that movie just because I was curious, and I found it really quite fascinating how countries use propaganda through film to get their people, excited about nationalism and everything. So I found the movie really interesting. They have subtitles. It's obviously in Chinese, in Mandarin, but
They've been doing that a long time. I know they like a big thing is like these anti-Japanese movies because the state has so many censorship requirements for their film industry. They basically are stuck making films about World War II and why the Japanese are evil. And like some of the things are insane, like a Chinese soldier throwing a grenade into the air to blow up a Japanese jet or plane.
Yeah, I mean, they've been. I remember watching some from like the 1930s.
Going way back.
Going way back, like this type of. Well, that would have been still under the nationalists, but kind of starting in the 40s and 50s, there was a lot of these like red movies, right?
Yeah.
Where you have the at the time it was more glorifying the party, but now nobody really wants to watch them as much, so they have to kind of turn into nationalism. So they're doing the kind of the 1980s America type of movie, Rambo, Top Gun.
I saw one where a Chinese soldier literally ripped a Japanese soldier in half with his bare hands.
I believe that was historically accurate.
Yes, that's World War II. It was a bloody hard war.
But the only part that's a lie would have been if it was a communist soldier who did it.
Yeah, because the communists actually weren't really fighting the Japanese forces.
Anyway, where were we?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, Africa. So,
Africa.
Wolf Warrior diplomacy, Africa. Let's talk a bit about that.
Yeah, because if you're talking about the Belt and Road, Africa inevitably comes up.
yeah, I mean, they were surprisingly, Mao went into Africa really early in his administration. They've been in Africa for quite a while. They built the Tazara line in the 30s, 40s, 50s, whatever. Yeah. So it's been half a century for sure that they've been there. So we kind of think that a lot of these contracts in the Belt and Road Initiative, and now China has 140 countries signed on with the Belt and Road Initiative, 140 of them. This isn't one, this isn't like a couple of countries. There are 140. And so in Africa, China needs resources. They need minerals. They need energy. They don't have these natural resources. And so the best thing to do was to go into countries that could provide them with the minerals that they needed in order to produce or manufacture products. And they're doing it more so now than before.
And it's not just about the minerals. It's, if ever you need proof that China is trying to create an alternative world order to compete against the United States, Belt and Road, 140 countries. They're creating this alternate sphere of influence that also ties into Chinese military expansion. We'll get into some of the digital Belt and Road stuff as well, but also about, surrounding India, for instance, and eliminating competition to the Chinese Communist Party world order.
Certainly the string of pearls, the Indo-Pacific is important. But I think another thing that we don't think about quite often is how China is inserting people into United Nations organizations. They have a member on the Human Rights Committee. The Human Rights Committee, can you believe it? And how they're doing that is if they have a country that can't pay their debt, they owe China. And so it's very easy. You are going to vote with us, tell the United Nations that we should have China or a proxy serve on these committees so that we can have China-friendly policies. And I think we're going to see more of the United Nations turn into a China-friendly organization.
Yeah. I mean, I would say
saw that with the WHO.
I would say you definitely had that before Belt and Road, but it's definitely increased more and more, not just in the UN, but also, ASEAN, the EU, all of these international bodies. And what's interesting too is you don't even have to be a country that's in debt to China. As long as you've signed a Belt and Road agreement with them, there's a certain expectation that you're going to align with China's politics, right? Otherwise, they'll be unhappy with you. You're not cooperating.
I think, 140 countries, like that's more than 2/3 of the countries, right? There's about 200, depending on what you call a country, right? And so essentially China now has influence over more than 2/3 of the world's votes in the world's only like important governing body. That's terrifying.
It's terrifying. I think everybody should be terrified. And yet I don't think the media or people really are aware that there's this tidal wave, and you can see the tidal wave, and it's right over top of us.
But the tidal wave is promising win-win mutual cooperation.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think people are ignoring this?
China took the opportunity for through the pandemic to engage with countries all over the world, and nobody is thinking about that, because we're all thinking about our health, our fate, our vaccines, whether we're going to go to school. The changes in political environment are taking precedent in the media, rather than really, guys, you should worry about this, because it's not a person who's an alarmist. I'm not an alarmist. I'm just a regular citizen. I live in Southern California. I am just awakened to information that I think people should know. And the reason you saw my book, the reason why my books are all colorful, they have pictures in it. And if you don't know where Laos is, fine, there's a map. If you don't know where the Caspian Sea is, fine, there's a map. I made every book so that it was like, I don't want to say a children's book, but it was like a book that you could actually read, that you don't have to know anything ahead of time. I explain social credit by showing you how the social credit works. So everything is in pictures.
I really appreciated it, actually. I like the colors in the pictures. Colors and pictures are great. Come on, who needs all those words?
I mean, I think there are plenty of words in the book.
There are plenty of words.
Yeah. I mean, I can't read, which is why I do videos.
Oh my God, guys.
Guys, don't rope me into that.
You're laughing about that, but the truth is that people need what you do. They need videos because it's easier for them to turn on a video or a podcast or something and watch it than to sit down for a long period of time and read thousands and thousands of words of text. And I'm aware of that, but Matt, I don't have your skills. So I haven't created these videos, but the best I could do is to create books with writing that's understandable and pictures so that I show you exactly where you were talking about digital, where the digital, Silk Road is, where China's ports are. This is where China's airports are. All over the world, you can see where there's piracy. Here are the latest pirate attacks. I actually have pictures that show little pirate boats.
It's great. Do you think you did that? Do you think you did that because you have so many years in education and teaching, like that gave you a certain perspective? Yeah.
I taught math for 35 years. People ask me every time, why is X plus X 2X? I don't know. Why is 1 apple plus 1 apple 2 apples? And, not to be sarcastic to them, because I wasn't. I answered the question every single time, realizing that it's this, it's just another person who doesn't know. It's fine, right? But given that, if they can't see that this is at universities, right? I retired from, colleges and universities, right? They need to see it. So I drew pictures. I was a big picture person. So when I found people who they said, I don't want to read a long article like that. It's too complicated. I mean, part of the complication is if you don't know where Fiery Cross Reef is or where Scarborough Shoal is, it's very difficult to read about Scarborough Shoal, right? Where are the paracels? Where are the spratlys? You can talk about this, but unless you show a picture, that's why I love what you guys do. Seriously, like you talk and then you have a picture. You show what, Matt, this is back to your videoing, right? They can actually see what you are trying to say. But people who are reading a book, they want to know this information as well, but they can't see it. And so I drew pictures.
Well, so hold on, just to get a little clarification. How is an X an apple?
That's good. Well, you can take a class from me and I'll go through the whole reason why the integral of 1 over x is the natural log of the absolute value of x plus c.
Yeah, I understood that.
A new show. Math unexplained.
Math
ununderstood.
unrepentant.
No, like
it can be about like
math undivided,
making fractals by hand on the complex plane or something. Those are because they're pretty, right? You know what I'm talking about. I can't read, but I can do math.
You can see it, right?
Yeah, fractals are pretty.
They are.
As are your books. But so to get a slightly more hinged. So it's interesting. At the start of 2020, it seemed like the Belt and Road was getting bad press. It seemed like, like countries like Malaysia were beginning to fight back against a lot of these predatory Belt and Road loans. X equals Apple. But then the coronavirus happened. How did that change things for Xi Jinping's Belt and Road plan?
As soon as 2020 happened, China went into the South China Sea and stopped oil exploration, stopped countries from building on their islands, started moving into countries. And that's not specifically Belt and Road, but China thinks of itself as the manufacturing capital of the world. Anyone who needs something manufactured, come to us because we're going to be the product distributor. They needed these trains not to help other countries. They needed the trains so that they could deliver all of their products to all of these places. And so there were all of these deliveries of face masks and PPE and ventilators and so on, continuously using the Belt and Road to transport materials that were needed by countries to all of these locations that shut down. Now, China didn't really shut down in the same way. They had their workers working despite the virus. Oh, yeah. They didn't have a virus in China, I remember. They don't have any deaths there. So they just had everybody continue to work. And same thing with the maritime Silk Road. They needed their ships traveling. And so their Belt and Road was the avenue for face mask diplomacy and vaccine diplomacy and all of their other kinds of diplomacies that they sent around the world.
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about also them going into the South China Sea, because it was kind of like when everybody was distracted, right? They were going to the South China Sea. They were starting this border conflict with India where they were encroaching on this territory. And it was like they were thinking, well, now's a good time for this.
It's a good time to build the concentration camps in Xinjiang, right? It's a great time to take more of Bhutan's land. I mean, they literally built Chinese villages on the other side of the border. Little just creeping in every country, taking a little bit more. They have a military base in Tajikistan, everywhere around. They said, we're your benefactors. We have money. we will help you. I don't know if you did a video on this, but they had these bars of gold that they were using to secure their money. It was lots of gold. And the gold was actually not gold at all. So I'm not sure how much money China really has. I'm sure that because they have produced things for all over the world, they have lots of money, but they told countries everywhere, we will help you. We know that you're having a really hard time, and we know that, you're financially unstable, but we can give you money. I don't know where the United States thinks it's going to just pick up, a few $1 trillion here or there. I mean, as if we have forgotten what dollars means, right? So I think, but everybody thinks that money grows on trees. So that's why everybody in the United States has their hand out to get, money, free money, right? Isn't that great? So China didn't just offer to give money to, loan money to the United States. They offered to loan money all over the world. Of course, there was a requirement that you help China out whenever China needed it.
And what's interesting to me that a lot of these Belt and Road deals, that were announced were very, they're often really it's going to be hundreds of $millions in this country, or, billions of dollars in Africa, this kind of thing. And then when it gets down to brass tacks, it seems like a lot of these projects kind of disappear. They don't actually,
the
happen.
money never
Or
shows
they
up.
start and they peter out
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah.
So that happened with the Philippines. So my focus really for quite a few years was just on the Philippines, because the Philippines fascinated me for quite a number of reasons. In part because Benigno Aquino and Duterte are such different personalities, and how that happened is just fascinating. So China, when Duterte was, before Duterte was elected, China offered the Philippines $26 billion. They haven't gotten that money. This is 4 years later, because Duterte took office in 2016.
Mm-hmm.
So they haven't gotten the money. They just made these promises. And if you look at the pictures of what China drew for what Manila could possibly look like, it is phenomenal. If you fly to Shanghai and you say, wow, that's really beautiful, can you do that for my country? And so you come back to Manila and you go, wow, little tuk-tuks here, and, very narrow roads here. And, we're going to build this magnificent city that is just as beautiful as Shanghai. Those specs are amazing. Nothing happened. China did not give that money to the Philippines. It was just promises. But Duterte, he was strung along like a leash, like he was on a leash. And China was like, here, I'll give you something. But he gave him nothing. He didn't give him anything. Right. And just, he wants him to give over his islands and his oil. That's what he wants.
Yeah, it's interesting because, Duterte had actually run when he was campaigning. He campaigned on this Standing Up to China platform, famously saying that he would ride a jet ski out to the Scarborough Shoal to defend the Philippines' claim. Later, he said that was hyperbole.
Really?
Yes. Yeah, actually, it's almost like a politician didn't follow through. But then, yeah, well, it was like he campaigned on this Stand Up to China platform, and then very quickly he moved towards China and away from the United States. But yet, despite ditching the U.S. as the long-term partner, Duterte really didn't get what he was promised for his country. So that's going to obviously, at some point, people in the Philippines are going to be like, wait a second, this just didn't work.
It's okay. He doesn't have to run for re-election.
That's right. They only get one term.
Yeah.
Well, he's trying to get his daughter, Sarah, to take over his place.
Oh, really?
So, so we'll see what that happens. She's the mayor of Davao, right, where he was a mayor. And so she's a mayor now, and he's trying to get her to become the president. So we'll see what happens with that.
So we might have the
you had,
Duterte dynasty.
you had the Aquino dynasty, Cory
That's true.
Aquino and Benigno, and we have it here, H.W. Bush and George W. Bush, and I think it's nice to have a legacy where a tiny group of elite people run a supposedly democratic country.
Well, I think what's interesting about what you were saying is like sort of how people around the world are enthralled by these Chinese megacities. They see that, it's like, oh wow, what a functional society China must be. Please tell us how we can do that. But the reality is those cities exist because they exist in an authoritarian regime where the state owns all the land, is able to control every aspect of the economy to funnel it into any kind of insane construction they want. It's not something that can be replicated in other parts of the world without that same kind of authoritarian system.
For sure. Well, going back to what Shelley was saying about the islands, and what happened right after the pandemic or during the pandemic, China went and tried to take another island, Whitsun Reef, hung outside of Whitsun Reef with hundreds of boats, thinking, we're ready to take your island. They said they were parked because it was a storm. What a cockamamie. Like, really, you must work really hard, China, to come up with these like fabulous stories that make no sense, since there wasn't a storm and they were all tied up right outside of the reef. I mean, Duterte had to do something to get those boats away from there. And this is what China does. It gets really close and it says, are you really gonna, you don't want to have a war, do you? We're going to get really close and we're going to snatch this island. And unless they push back, China will take the island.
Which they actually call it the Scarborough model, named after what they did in the Scarborough Shoal, because I don't think they really expected at the time that they could get away with that. And when it turned out they could, hey, new foreign policy.
But they didn't have to get away with it. I mean, the United States could have gone, Barack Obama had this negotiation. China was supposed to leave. The United States could have gone in and said, you violated this. But just like the Alaska conversation with Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, you can promise 2 minutes and we'll take 15. This is your new model. Give me 2, I'll take 15. That's the China model.
It's like they say, if you give a mouse an island in the South China Sea,
he'll ask for a glass of milk.
Yeah, that's how the story goes.
Okay.
I should write children's books.
Uh-huh.
Well, so let's also talk about a big focus of the Belt and Road is the digital aspect, the digital Belt and Road. And that ties into Chinese telecom Huawei, creating smart cities. This is sort of a big thing that they're doing in Africa. But, the United States has been trying to create a global pushback against Huawei. So why is this Huawei digital Belt and Road so significant to the Chinese Communist Party?
So if you can control all of what people say, just look at the United States. If you can control what people say, then you can stop them from saying anything that, this is authoritarianism 101. You can stop them from doing anything. Well, in Africa, for example, the biggest phone companies in Africa are now Chinese phone companies. And the reason why they're more likely to buy a Chinese phone is because China undercuts the price. So charges them less than it costs to even make the phone. Why would they do that? They want to do that because they want to have everybody to have a Chinese phone. They want to be on their system and they want them plugged into their internet so that they can listen. They built this big, like CIA, NSA type of place in Guizhou province. It's huge. It's massive. And they're collecting people's DNA. They're collecting their voice. They're collecting their records. As if they can take information from people all over the world and hold on to that information, they can control you.
Well, some people listening might be like, wait, they're taking our DNA, but like this has actually come out. The what was the name of the company with the prenatal tests?
BGI.
BGI, yeah. One of the most popular prenatal tests in the world. And that information goes back to China. They are collecting DNA from a lot of people around the world.
A lot of when COVID hit, BGI started going around to different countries offering PCR tests.
Kind of this vaccine Belt and Road.
And then they also offered to build testing facilities in country. They offered in the US, they offered California, a number of other states to build testing facilities for them for PCR tests. And then the US federal government was like, do not take that money. You are not allowed to. But if they hadn't stepped in, I mean, California bought $3 billion worth of masks from China. I mean, I don't see that they necessarily would have not accepted this Chinese, like bio
Trojan horse.
Well, I wasn't going to say Trojan horse, but like this company, right, that has an interest in collecting all of this DNA data from the US and other places, because like data is power now. And California might not have said no.
How about 23andMe, Ancestry.com? How much money, I always say, how much money is your life worth? Or your belief or your company worth? How much can I buy you for? If you give 23andMe or Ancestry.com billions more than they could possibly ever imagine in their lifetime, and China can do it easily, and then they have everybody's DNA that was sent into those agencies. Imagine it wouldn't be that difficult to get a lot more data. The question is who's going to stop them, and whether or not they can, take those deals or shuffle off some of that data underground so that people don't know. I would like to think that there isn't a price tag on my head, which is why I continue to write books, even though I know it's dangerous. But I know that there are other people who don't. I have people who have been around my office who will not have their name or information shown. They'll help me, but they will not. They don't want to be involved. They don't want China to know anything because they're afraid. And I think this is going to happen more and more. Once someone feels that their life is, or their family's life is in danger, they will no longer do anything or say anything against China, which is what's happening in Hollywood and what's happening in Silicon Valley. And, there are a lot of places where people are not willing to say anything against China.
This really is, it shows the terror of the alternate Chinese system that the Communist Party is trying to set up. I don't even want to call it Chinese. It's just a communist totalitarian state that's influencing the entire world. However, so the Belt and Road, on paper, it's this infrastructure investment project, and it is creating this horrible alternate system that, someday the Chinese Communist Party, you could use it to dominate the world. But at the same
someday,
well, it's well on the way. But, a lot of the world does need infrastructure development. If China obviously was able to step into a market where there was a big need for it, why did this vacuum exist that the Chinese Communist Party was so able to exploit?
They can produce items cheaper than anyone else in the world. If you're using slave labor, it doesn't take a lot of math to figure out that if you have to pay someone $15, $20 an hour in the United States and it costs $0 an hour there, then it's a whole lot cheaper to produce something, right? So once you have that ability to manufacture at very reduced cost, and you're willing to take a hit, like we were talking about Africa, you're willing to sell phones to everybody in Africa for less than the cost of the phone. Or you probably read in the news this solar panels. So they're producing these solar panels that I guess are very difficult to produce. So doing it in Xinjiang, and they're selling them at less than the cost of making them, so that no other company wants to go into that market. You were saying a vacuum, but the vacuum is created because if China can get everybody out of the marketplace because they can undercut all other competitors, then there's a vacuum. Like they're the only one. They have a monopoly. And so they're trying to create monopolies in certain areas so that the, other countries don't get involved in the manufacturing.
Which is possible because the Chinese Communist Party doesn't need to be accountable to the Chinese people. Like we just did an episode recently about the dams that have been breaking in China after the recent flooding. And we quoted one official who was saying that most dams in China are old and in desperate need of repairs, but there's just no money to do that. However, there is what's the Belt and Road price tag? $4 trillion?
I mean, that's not real.
That's not real, but
I mean,
but it's
hundreds,
in the hundreds of billions.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's not like the United States where like every time there's any amount of foreign aid, you get like a bunch of people saying, hey, why are we sending money to a foreign country?
Right. I mean, also, what you were talking about with the undercutting with the phones or the solar panels, they do with infrastructure as well. They will go in and bid on a port in Greece and offer much lower, like they'll offer a higher price. They will do it for less than, or they will bring in and operate it for less than anybody else. Like they will basically make it so that financially they are the only choice.
Yeah. I mean, when you were in Greece, the port of Piraeus, the whole they'd basically